Radio and podcasts have an old problem. Fortunately, the fix isn't hard. Brad Meltzer is celebrating his 25th year as a novelist and has just published his latest thriller. It's called The Lightning Rod. Radio and podcast talent can learn a valuable lesson from Meltzer, who says readers no longer have the patience for the plot twist. So flip on terrestrial radio anywhere, and you're going to hear announcers struggling with O.L.D. That's on-ramp laziness disease. The on-ramp is that short period of transition from the end of a song or a commercial break to the host's main content. Signs of on-ramp laziness disease include song back cells with no related content, time checks, a forecast without a relevant local reason, teases of 2 or 3 upcoming songs, one host asking how the other is doing today, very often followed by a co-host saying, "I didn't get enough sleep last night." A couple of other signs for on-ramp laziness disease: awkward segues into a planned break, and just random plugs for ticket giveaways or trivia games. These symptoms are still common on most radio stations, and very often you're going to hear 3 or 4 of these things I listed in one single break. So let's talk about Apple Music, which has pumped a considerable amount of money into its streaming music stations. And I recently checked out the app's most popular show just as the famous host was setting up an interview with a well-known artist-actress. He came out of a song. He started the setup as you'd expect, the host praising the artist's new movie. We hear the phone ringing in the background, except instead of hearing 2 or 3 rings followed by hello, the phone kept ringing. While we waited for the artist to pick up, the host fumbled through an impromptu movie review for like 30 seconds. He talked, and the phone rang, and she never picked up. The host awkwardly ended the call and rolled into a song. Clearly, this was an interview that needed to be pre-recorded so that when the song ended, the host could get right into the interview. My frustration with the well-known streaming radio host pushed me out of Apple Music and into my podcast app, where I pressed play on a favorite tech show. One of the reasons I like this particular podcast is that it promises 4 topics in just 30 minutes, and they stick with it. The format is simple and smart. 2 hosts, 2 guests, each has a topic, and the 4 go around the Zoom room giving their opinions on each topic. It's a great format, but the podcast suffers terribly from O.L.D, in part because the 2 hosts always begin their show with, "How are you?" and they rarely have good answers. The tech podcast further suffers from O.L.D because as the hosts and guests are formally introduced, there is an attempt by each to inject some personality into their hellos, which are rarely interesting. What the host should do is pre-interview the guests and each other to discover who has the best tech-related personal story that week and use that story as the first topic. Back to novelist Brad Meltzer, who shared that in his first book, which was published in 1997, the hook or plot twist came in around page 40, which means that his early novels had 39 pages of on-ramp. Not anymore. Today, Meltzer says readers don't want to wait. Here's a quote. "We have no patience for page 40 anymore. It's like grab me in the first chapter or the first sentence." Meltzer doesn't host a radio show or a podcast yet, but I bet if he did, he wouldn't spend one precious second, let alone 2 or 3 minutes, making listeners wait for the hook, the plot twist, the payoff. Too many radio and podcast hosts still don't see on-ramp laziness disease as the serious problem it is. For radio, it can be deadly, since a bored listener can quickly switch to another station or a podcast or a streaming service. For podcasters, it's not deadly, but with skip buttons on podcast apps, they risk losing a valuable window in which to endear themselves to the listener. Don't fall victim to O.L.D. When you plan your breaks content, plan the on-ramp. Request regular air check sessions with a programmer or producer, and of course, air check yourself multiple times a week. I'm Steve. We do show prep at InterPrep.com, and I'd like to send it to you free 5 days a week. Sign up at InterPrep.com/free. Have a great show, and I'll talk to you soon.